Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right into some absolutely fascinating source material that is going to completely reshape how we view the biomechanics of the aging horse, specifically those amazing veterans aged 20 and over. We're going to really rethink what's happening to them physically and, more importantly, how we can best support them.
You know, it's incredibly common to look at a 20-plus-year-old horse and just kind of assume they're breaking down, right? That they're just slowly losing their ability. But the research we're diving into today actually challenges that rather depressing myth. It invites us to see this phase not as a simple loss of function, but as a complex, highly active, and honestly pretty brilliant reorganization of the horse's entire biomechanical system.
Okay, let's dive into this. When we look at a mature horse, their movement is all about efficiency-based coordination. Everything is totally optimized for peak performance. But in the aging horse, we see a massive shift over to capacity-based coordination. They maintain their movement through adaptation, and this is key here, through compensation. It's a structural reorganization. Aging isn't simply a reduction in ability, it is a fundamental ground-up shift in exactly how the system manages load.
Section 1. The physical reality. Tissue and movement changes. Let's look closely at the tissues themselves. Bone generally holds on to its structural integrity pretty well, but it remodels a lot slower, which means it's just less responsive to new loads. Meanwhile, tendons and ligaments lose their elasticity. That means less energy return and a much more direct transmission of force straight through the body. Because of this, even tiny irregularities in the ground suddenly have a much bigger mechanical impact. It's literally like how we feel just a bit stiffer getting out of bed in the morning. And finally, because those tendons act stiffer, the muscles have to work way harder just to maintain basic movement, which inevitably leads to faster fatigue and slower recovery. The veteran athlete essentially loses that youthful bounce and has to rely heavily on pure muscular effort to keep going. So, the crucial point is this. The aging horse does not lose structure. It loses the capacity to adapt and recover at the same rate. The physical structure is still very much intact. Your horse is not falling apart. Their system is just operating on a much tighter margin now. They simply can't bounce back from stress or sudden variations in work the way they used to. Because they are dealing with this tighter margin, the horse actually engages in what's called system reorganization. The biomechanical system actively redistributes force. Hind limb propulsion might become a bit less precise, and you'll often see the thoracic wave become smaller in amplitude and just a bit less consistent. To compensate for this reduced transmission, the horse might actually shift its load slightly forward onto the forelimbs. And listen, they aren't doing this because they're broken. They're doing it to preserve function. They adjust to survive.
Section 2. The neurological shift. The adaptive bandwidth.
So the older horse leans heavily into what they already know. They rely on deeply established motor patterns. Think about it. A developing horse uses variation to learn, and a mature horse uses it to adapt. But the 20-plus horse, they enter a phase of reduced adaptive bandwidth. They maintain their stability by sticking to familiar, deeply ingrained routines rather than exploring new ways to move. For them, it's all about consistency.
They maintain their movement efficiently by using those established patterns, but they lose the ability to quickly modify those patterns when conditions suddenly change. Now, while this neurological reliance gives them great comfort and stability in familiar environments, it also means that unexpected changes, like a totally new surface, a sudden increase in workload, or really varying terrain, can create subtle tension or cautious behavior. Their nervous system just can't reorganize fast enough anymore.
Section 3. The Compensation Balancing Act. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it reframes a word we usually dread as riders. Compensation is not inherently bad. In fact, it's exactly what keeps the aging horse moving. On the functional side, it maintains movement, it safely distributes load, and it sustains activity. The system is essentially protecting its weak areas by shifting the burden around. But on the flip side, we do see the danger: problematic compensation. This happens when the load gets way too concentrated in certain structures, the movement becomes restricted, and the system totally loses its ability to adjust any further.
So how exactly do we get from functional to problematic? Well, it happens through a very distinct timeline of system drift. Step 1 begins with fatigue. The older horse fatigues faster because of those muscular changes we talked about earlier. Because of Step 2, slower recovery, the horse might start their next session still slightly fatigued. And that leads directly to Step 3, where the horse starts relying on a compensatory movement pattern, not just occasionally, but persistently. Over time, the physical tissues adapt to that altered pattern, creating a feedback loop that eventually crashes right into Step 4, problematic dysfunction. And this brings us to a hard truth. Dysfunction occurs when the system's ability to compensate is exceeded or becomes limiting. It doesn't happen overnight, folks. It emerges gradually. You're going to see it as increased effort, maybe some hesitation in tasks that used to find comfortable, stiffness, and noticeable asymmetry. It is the exact point where the horse's brilliant adaptation strategy simply runs out of options.
Section 4. A new blueprint for management.
All right, for practical management. First up, maintain a consistent, predictable workload. Their nervous system absolutely craves routine because it supports stability. Second, manage the load with shorter durations. Remember, unchecked fatigue is the absolute enemy here because it's what triggers that problematic system drift. Third, any variation should be supervised and highly gradual. And finally, prioritize recovery between sessions. Recovery isn't just rest. It's the critical time the system actually needs to consolidate its current state and restore its ability to function. Managing an older horse is all about supporting their margins.
Now, there's a crucial intervention strategy here that might feel kind of counterintuitive to a lot of us riders. Support existing compensations. Do not force previous movement patterns. If your veteran horse has subtly shifted their weight or altered their thoracic wave to accommodate their aging tissues, trying to abruptly fix them and force them back into their youthful outline can dangerously disrupt their delicate functional stability. You literally risk pushing them straight into dysfunction.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core message we need to take away here. Do not attempt to restore previous capacity. Support the system in functioning effectively within its current capacity. This is such an incredibly empowering principle. It takes so much pressure off both you and your horse. We aren't trying to make our horses 20 years younger, right? We are prioritizing long-term sustainability over peak performance, working in harmony with the brilliant adaptive system they have right now.
So I'm going to leave you with this question to really ponder. Are you trying to restore your horse's past, or are you supporting their present? When we actively align our expectations, our workload, and our recovery strategies with our horse's current abilities, we can maintain their quality of life and their beautiful movement for years to come. Thanks for exploring this with me on this explainer, and we will catch you next time.